Но даже фраза preview релиз, что она вам говорит? Ничего. Потому что статус view сейчас pre-альфа. То есть вся эта критика в сторону темплейтов и всего остального — это критика pre-альфы. И фраза «не используйте это в продакшене», по-моему, очевидно любому человеку, да, который видит слово pre-альфа. То есть это не то чтобы оправдание Vue 3, как бы любая критика обоснована, но учитывайте stage. А теперь перейдем на английский и поговорим о composition functions. And before I start, I want to give you one important warning. When we first introduced composition functions API with an RFC, we made a huge mistake. There was a sentence there saying, progressively migrate away from deprecated options until eventually switching to the standard build. And there is a word here that created a literal shitstorm around Vue. Guess what word was it this? Deprecated. Because if people can read something wrong, they will read something wrong. And here you can see the reaction of Reddit. The current syntax to be deprecated. Composition functions will eventually be the only way to build Vue components. Yeah, really. In fact, it was our mistake, because we should have done this correctly. We should have done it more clearly. That, okay, it's one more. That composition API is going to be purely additive. This new feature is just added like we have render functions, we have renderless components, and how many of you who are using Vue, obviously, have used renderless components? Please raise your hands. Oh, nice. But in fact, you can live without them, and you can live without composition functions as well. And the shitstorm was real. We had even an article about it, Vue.js Darkest Day, and before this day, I actually thought it was Vue Darkest Day, but now I know it was the talk of Ilya, because this was really Darkest Day. So, I will introduce myself one more time. My name is Natalia, and I'm a Google developer expert in web technologies. As Ilya already said, I'm a Vue.js core team member. I care mostly about documentation and CLI, and I'm not original. I'm a senior front-end engineer at GitLab. And it's really interesting that first two talks of the day are about Vue and from GitLab. We didn't pay. Not really. So let's switch to this new feature and let's try to understand why do we need a new API at all. If creating a new API was so hated on Reddit, maybe we're fine with option syntax, like with Vue 2. Maybe we don't need any kind of new shiny features. Let's have a look at the code. If you wonder what's this, it's Cat Explorer. It's a simple application. I will make it a bit bigger, where you can search for cat breeds. Ooh, the internet is really slow. And you can sort them. So this is a simple code on Vue 2, on option syntax, and this is a code for searching a cat with an access. And this is the code for the sorting option. So we have one component with two features. We have two parts of business logic inside of it. Let's take a look how they're placed within component with an option syntax. So these highlighted parts, don't try to read these, just take a look how they're located. These parts belong to search. These parts belong to sorting. If we try to see how they're located, you see that it's really fragmented. When you're working on a single feature, in terms of business logic, you're jumping between different parts, because components are grouped with options. not with the logic, because we have data, computed methods, and lifecycle hooks. So how to compose reusable features, the way where they are grouped, and when you can work with them within one chunk of the code. Mixins. Mixins are really nice, and if you never worked with Vue.js, what mixin is? It's just an object that can contain any option Vue component can contain. So here we located everything that belongs to search. We have breed search in data, we have method, and it's search mixin. As for sorting, we're doing the same. We placed hard-coded options here, and we have it computed with sorted results. When we include these mixins in Vue component, they look like this. So it looks like we grouped the logic and everything is great. No. Why not? Because these mixins, both, are not reusable. We hard-coded endpoint. So if I want to search for dogs, no way. We hard-coded options. So we have only these 3 options to sort. They are conflict-prone. And this is a real pain because sometimes when you have a component where like 5 mixins included, and trust me, in GitLab, it's like a real life example, we have them, you can't realize where any method comes from, and if you accidentally trying to name your method functionally like search user, let's include this to this mixin, but another mixin already had this function. And you know what will happen? It will be overwritten without any kind of warning. If you have this method in your component, it will be overwritten by the component. So namespacing is not a thing for a simple mixin. And yeah, they're unclear. So it's really hard to understand what part of the component is from which mixin. Option 2, scoped slots. This concept is more advanced than mixins, and it's really nice in terms of Vue 2. So let's have a look how we can implement this logic in the scoped slot. If you don't know what slots are in Vue, if you ever worked with web components, it's very similar. In fact, slot is just a slot in the component where you can render a content from its parent component. So if we're leaving a space where we want to place some content from the parent. Scoped slots are just a bit more complicated. Imagine when we have a child component, but we want to expose a part of its scope to the parent. This is scoped slot. So imagine we have some kind of generic search component. We're passing a method to it, just some round search method, and we're exposing everything we need from the child component to breed search object. And we're just rendering its property. So how it's done for the search. Within the child component, like generic search, we have getResults method passed. And we're just running this method. We have no idea what's within the method. There will be an Axios call passed from the parent. And we're just setting value to this query. And we have query and results and data. We're going to expose them to the parent one, as well as run and set. And this is how we're using generic search in the parent component. So we have run breed search passed. We have value as a breed search query. And if you wonder why I didn't use vModel here, it exists in Vue 2, but not within the scoped slot. So this looks better than previous one, but scoped slots still are not really flexible because we need to explicitly pass everything we need. And they're less performant. Why? because we are creating stateful components for every single part of the logic. More to say, everything we're exposing in the scope slot is available only on runtime. I cannot have breed search query in my computed because it's available only on template. So what's the option? Looking for the way to create reusable chunks of logic, we came to the idea of composition functions. I know many people like to name them hooks, and when we're discussing the name for the API, and it's really complicated stuff to name the API. It was function-based API. It was like different options. One of the most popular options within the team was like not hooks API. So I believe you cannot check how it works without seeing the code. Talk is cheap. That's why we're going to have a live coding session. First, please let me know if you can see the code there on the back seats. OK. So here you can see very simple implementation of catExplorer with sorting and search. And everything is placed like I've shown in data. So you can see we have query and results, we have sorting, we have some computed for the endpoint, and we're using Lodash to sort everything. Let's try to create a function with a composition API to encapsulate everything for the search part of the logic. That's why I already have this folder use, and I'm going to create search.js here and sorting.js. And I will import some helper methods from the module because composition API is a part of Vue 3, but you can already play with it with a Vue composition API npm module. And it's not like template compiler. Don't use it in production, but it's more ready. And you don't need to write render functions like Ilya did. So it's Vue composition API. And we will be exporting function. We will name it useSearch. Really familiar, right? But it's not hooks API. Yeah, I hear someone is laughing that you're from React. So what should we have within this function? Let's take a look at the app view code one more time. What belongs to search here? We have this breed search object with query and results. So obviously, we want to keep the state of the search in the composition function. And I'm writing this within sorting, and nobody told me, OK, thanks. So we're going to create a reactive state within the function. And for this, in Vue 3, we will have a helper method with a really intuitive name, reactive. So I will create a const search state, which will be a reactive state, where I want to have query, oh my God, and results. As you can see, unlike Vue 2, where all the reactive was set under the hood, and that's why people like to blame Vue for having too much magic. In Vue 3 composition functions, you can see what state is reactive because you're setting it explicitly. This is completely similar to having query and results in component data. Because under the hood, we're adding reactiveness to both of these properties. What else do we have in the search logic? We have breed endpoint, but we will move it to the function from computed. And we have a run search method. And obviously, we want We don't want to have Axios within the composition function because it should be as abstract as possible. So it should know nothing about Axios. That's why we will just pass getResults method here. And we will create a method within the composition function. It will be run search, and it will be just a function that runs getResults with a search state query, because we need a parameter. And it will store the result, the search state, results. Okay, equal to res. One more thing, we have this function run on mounted. And we can encapsulate this part too, because composition functions have an access to the lifecycle hooks. So on mounted, we will run the breed search. And we're almost ready. We just need to return everything we want to have in the component in return statement. And we want to have search state and run search. Now we can import this function and start to refactor the component. One of the good and bad things about composition functions is you can use composition API alone with old good option syntax. Why it's good? Because you can refactor everything iteratively. Why it's bad? Because there will be kind of a mess within your components, especially if you have a lot of junior developers, because every component will have one more option inside of it. So let's import our use search. And let's add one more option to view component, and this option is setup. The setup function is running the same time we have a created hook. One component is created, and it's running before every data computed methods are initiated. That's why setup will have an access. Like vice versa. Setup don't have an access to this, and it doesn't have an access to anything exposed in data and computed. But data and computed have an access to everything exposed in setup. And we will have our, let's take search state and run search from use search function. We're going to pass a function here because you remember we are expecting some kind of getResults function to run. So what do we have in getResults? First, I will move endpoint here from the computed. And I will return an Axios call we already have in methods. I will change it slightly because we have an endpoint. And instead of breed search query, we have query parameter. And we only want to return everything in then. There is a mistake here. And if you listened attentively about setup, you will notice it, right? This. We don't have an access to this context. So how can I work with an access? And I added access to view prototype on purpose. Please don't do this. It's like adding everything to view prototype by hand is not really good. Just import access to components. But right now, it's in the view prototype. So how to access this? Setup takes parameters. Fast parameter is props, and we don't need props right here because it's root component. But it also has a second one, which is context. And I can take context, and I have access on context root. This way, you can access everything what you previously had in view prototype. And obviously, as you can see, VS Code is kind of complaining about search state and run search because we need to return them. Right now, both search state and run search are available on this in data computed methods, and we can start using them. First of all, I will remove this part. We don't need endpoint anymore, as well as methods and mounted. And I can start replacing breed search results with the search state. And same for the template. Because we had query, right now it's search state query. Run search here. Okay. Let's go to the browser. Wow, surprisingly it works. I was expecting something wrong in the console. Let's check if search works. Yes, search works. As for sorting, sorting still works as well. So we just exposed a part of the logic, which is really nice, and we have this setup function exposing search state and run search. Let's optimize it. Probably you noticed, like, if we're stating everything in search state, it's nice when we have two properties, but what if we have like 5, and every of them will be accessed with search state something? It's boring. Let's have some kind of destructuring. Let's take query and results from search state and use them explicitly without additional property. So let's make const query and results from search state. Easy, and we will just expose them. Like, naming is not my strong side. That's why we have them without search prefix. Same, we're taking them here. Yeah, not really good because we have this kind. Let's try to add some names here. Like when we're destructuring. And I always fail this time because I don't remember what is actually a property and what is an alias. Query results, search results. If I'm wrong, just say this. Nobody knows. It's the results. Okay. So we don't have a naming conflict with query right now. Let's try to expose it here and replace everything to just search results. And search query as well. How do you think? Will this work or not? Something is wrong, right? We have no issues in the console, but it's not working. Why? It's because we lost reactivity. In the moment we destructured an object, we lost reactivity because search state is not just a simple JavaScript object anymore. It's reactive state. And when we're doing this, we're losing the reactivity. But there is a thing that helps us to fix this kind of issue. I will use this magic method to refs, and then I will explain what's going on under the hood. So we are converting, reactive state to refs. And what is the ref? In fact, ref is created in Vue to make some primitive value reactive. Because when we're using reactive, we're working with an object with a set of properties. But what if I want to have a nice reactive primitive? That's why we have refs. And what ref is doing under the hood, it's creating an object with a single property value. And this property is actually reactive. When I'm destructuring the reactive state with refs, I'm creating two refs, search query and search results. And I can simply use them in the template. If you wonder what's the difference between reactive and refs. So refs, it's like using separate variables in JavaScript. When we have x, y, and we're using them separately reactive, it's completely the same, but with object properties. So let's see if two refs actually helped us with the functionality. Yep, now it works. I wonder what's the time slot? How much time do we have? 5 minutes. Okay, challenge accepted. Let's write sorting as well. I will just copy paste and import and start with a ref. Now let's write the same function for the sorting. I will name it use sorting. And it will take two properties. It's an input. It will be an array we are going to sort, and options. And I forgot function. So we will have a sorting state here, which will be a reactive object as well, where we store input and options. We will have selected option index, like we had in the component. It's just an index of an option we're selecting. And as you can see, it was started as 0. So we're going to have it as a ref, as a standalone reactive property. And it's a constant. And we will have an output, which will be a computed. And as you can see, this computed is imported from the composition API as well. It's all good, Vue to computed, but standalone one. And let's copy paste the code of what we're actually going to return from sorting. And we will import Lodash here as well. Someone is like really dislikes Lodash. It's like mic drop. Okay, we have sorting state options. We're going to use selected option index, and please be attentive here because we're using ref, and this ref is not unwrapped in the template. This means we're going to use value. Because as you remember, ref is an object with a single property value. That's why it's here. So we're going to use sorting state input. And we just need to return everything. And selected option index. OK. And we're going to have one more option here. So I will just import use sorting. And I will copy paste everything I want to expose. input here will be a computed property taken from results we had from search. And options is just an array of options we already had here. Okay, and we can delete everything from data and compute it as well. And let's replace it in the template. As you can see here, we're not using value because view template will do unwrap of refs under the hood. Oops, output. Okay, let's see if, no, it's not complaining, but it's not working because I forgot computed is actually returning a ref as well. That's why I'm not using sorting state input, but sorting state input value. Yep, it works. I hope it was 5 minutes. So if you wonder and you want to play with the composition API, here is actually the module for it. It's on the GitHub. And if you want to play with the composition IP demo I just had here, it's exposed on GitLab. Yay, product placement, finally. And it has a few branches, so you can see how it's implemented with slots, mixins, and composition API. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia, for such interesting talk. We have a few questions. First of all...
Можна на русском?
Окей. Так, тоді я буду питатися переводити, некоторі на українську, некоторі російською. Хорошо. В третій версії Vue чи буде які-небудь, забув, як переводити слово, бенефіти в сервер-сайд рендерингу?
В чому ще раз?
Сервер-сайд рендерингу.
Насправді сервер-сайд рендеринг дуже сильно не зміниться, але будуть ті ж самі бенефіти, які ми отримуємо від Vue 3 itself. Перформанс, як такий, і типізація.
І друге питання тут же, чи використовуєте ви його в GitLab?
Ще раз використовуємо?
Сервер-сайд рендеринг, чи використовуєте ви його в GitLab?
Добре, давайте так. Ми використовуємо сервер-сайд рендеринг, але це не має ніякого відношення до Vue, тому що ми Ruby on Rails application. Тобто наш сервер-сайд рендеринг – це XAML-файли.
Ага, дякую. Друге питання. Чи цей API має ту ж саму імплементацію, що і React-хуки?
Ні, воно має як спільне, так і відмінне з React-хуками. Тобто спільне ви всі бачите, я думаю, так? Це навіть неймінг-конвенція дуже схожа, але Vue-хуки працюють на трошки іншій реактивності і призначені трошки для іншого. Крім того, в нас є доступ до лайфсайкл хуків, як ви бачили. Якщо вам цікаво глибше, чим відрізняються, чим схожі React-хуки і Composition API, в нас є невеличкий розділ в RFC, порівняння, власне, Composition API і хуків.
Дякую. І ще таке питання щодо допомоги якого формату від ком'юніті могла б бути корисною для прискорення розвитку Vue?
Тут, як звичайно, як будь-який open-sourcer, це contributions welcome. Тобто, якщо ви зацікавлені контриб'ютити у Vue, зараз якраз найкращий момент, я недарма показав репозиторій VueNext. Я обіцяю, що за тиждень там будуть issue. Швидше за все, просто pre-альфу відкрили тільки вчора, теж на конференції, і я думаю, Еван просто забув відкрити issues. Це нормально. Тобто, створюйте issue, створюйте pull request. Якщо ви бачите, що щось не працює, і це справді не працює, а вам не здається, не треба писати про це, наприклад, в Telegram. Просто відкриваєте issue, тому що ніхто нічого не пофіксить, поки ви про це не скажете.
Дякую. А як зрозуміти, якщо немає ніяких консоль-ерорів, де проблема, як її дебажити?
Ви маєте на увазі у Vue 3 чи?
Так, саме так.
Насправді зараз поки що цих ворнінгів немає, тому що це все ще pre-альфа. Вони будуть.
І тут сходу ж питання щодо преальфи. Коли нам очікувати третю версію Vue?
Давайте я спеціально відкрию, щоб не бути голослівною. У мене є roadmap. Він відкритий. Тобто, якщо хтось цікавиться, що це, заходите у Vue, тут є проекти, є roadmap і спойлери. Я зроблю трошки побільше.
Не скоро, так? Да?
Чому? Перший квартал 2020-го. Тобто, он там внизу official release.
Дякую. А що з тестуванням третьої версії Vue?
Дивіться, оскільки поки що ядро в преальфі, екосистеми як такої навколо нього не існує і існувати не може, тому що міняється саме ядро. Тобто тестування буде кращим, але поки що робота над Vue Test Utils, так само як Vuex і Vue Router, не ведеться, і тому такі питання задавати трошки завчасно.
Дякую. От те, що додавали хуки. Тобто це було якось...
Це не хуки.
Ну, вони так виглядають, добре. От саме в цьому якраз і це й цікавить аудиторію. Тобто Vue намагається слідувати тому, як React рухається, чи може є якась між ними комунікація в цьому плані?
Ні, між ними безумовно є комунікація, я не буду її озвучувати зі сцени. Тобто, ні, вона цензурна, не тому. Але насправді, так, я думаю, що я не можу за це ручатися, але майже впевнена, що ідея Composition API, коли Еван з нею прийшов, вона була надихнена хуками, як такими. І, в принципі, я не бачу нічого поганого в тому, що фреймворки запозичують щось один у одного, тому що чим більше ми маємо схожостей між різними фреймворками, тим легше нам, в тому числі, міняти стек.
І останнє питання. От якщо ми будемо переписувати з другого Vue на третій, чи є якісь рекомендації, як уникнути якогось безпорядку в плані старої версії, нової версії, як краще мігрувати?
А для цього ми якраз зараз пишемо Migration Guide, який буде опублікований приблизно на момент публікації бети. Тобто до бети ми напишемо готовий гайд по міграції. Я скажу зразу, що великих складностей не буде, якщо ви не збираєтесь все відразу переписувати на Composition API. Тому побачимо.
Дякую.